Imagine waking up to one of those mornings where the NFL world feels completely upside down, where your phone buzzes nonstop, group chats explode, and every sports show scrambles to rewrite their entire rundown because a single move has changed everything. And in this alternate NFL universe, that moment arrives when reports begin flooding social media, claiming that Trevor Lawrence, the former number one overall pick, the face of the Jacksonville Jaguars, the so-called generational quarterback who was supposed to spend his entire prime in Florida, has signed with the Dallas Cowboys in a move that absolutely nobody saw coming. A move so massive that it instantly becomes one of the most talked about quarterback changes in league history. And as fans try to process it, the shock only grows when details start leaking out about how this deal even happened, because for years, the Cowboys were seen as locked in with Dak Prescott, a steady leader, a respected veteran, and someone who had taken Dallas to multiple playoff appearances. But Jerry Jones has never been a man afraid of bold swings, and this hypothetical signing feels like the ultimate Jerry Jones move, a reminder that the Cowboys owner lives for moments that dominate headlines and redefine eras, and in this scenario, the seeds for this stunning decision were planted quietly, behind closed doors, long before the public had any idea, as Dallas evaluated its long-term future and asked the uncomfortable question every franchise eventually has to ask: is good enough actually good enough? Or do you chase greatness, even if it means burning the bridge you're standing on? And Trevor Lawrence represents that chase, the idea of untapped ceiling. The belief that with the right structure, the right protection, and the right offensive weapons, he could become the kind of quarterback who doesn't just get you to the playoffs, but takes you through them. And when word breaks that Lawrence is now wearing a Cowboys star, the reaction across the league is instant chaos. Jaguars fans feel blindsided and betrayed. Cowboys fans swing wildly between disbelief and uncontrollable excitement, and neutral fans just sit back and enjoy the madness, because this is exactly the kind of move that reminds everyone why the NFL is king of sports drama. And as analysts begin breaking it down, the conversation immediately shifts to what this means for Dallas on the field, because suddenly the Cowboys offense looks completely different. Trevor Lawrence brings size, arm talent, mobility, and youth, and in this imagined scenario, he steps into an offense stacked with weapons, throwing to elite receivers protected by a strong offensive line, and guided by a coaching staff desperate to prove they can maximize a superstar quarterback, and people start replaying Lawrence's best throws in their minds, imagining them happening under the bright lights of AT&T Stadium, imagining those deep shots, those off-platform throws, those moments where raw talent takes over, and at the same time, the pressure skyrockets because there is no place in the NFL with higher expectations or less patience than Dallas, and Lawrence would instantly become the most scrutinized player in football. Every incompletion dissected, every interception debated for days, and every win or loss framed as evidence that this gamble was either genius or insanity. And then there's the Dak Prescott angle, which adds another layer of emotional weight to this hypothetical move, because Dak is beloved in that locker room and respected across the league. And in this scenario, his departure would feel like the end of an era. A reminder that the NFL is a business, no matter how strong the relationships are. And fans would argue endlessly about whether Dallas gave up on him too soon, or whether this was the right time to reset with a younger quarterback who could potentially dominate for the next decade. And while Dallas fans argue, the rest of the NFC starts to panic, because the idea of Trevor Lawrence leading America's team immediately shifts the balance of power. Suddenly, the Cowboys aren't just a playoff team, they're a perceived Super Bowl threat, and rivals like the Eagles, 49ers, and Lions would be forced to adjust their long-term plans, knowing that a new quarterback era might be forming in Dallas, and the media circus would be relentless, with every press conference, every quote, every body language moment analyzed like it's a presidential debate. And in his introductory press conference, in this alternate reality, Lawrence would sit there calm and composed, saying all the right things about opportunity, legacy, and winning, while Jerry Jones beams beside him like a man who just pulled off the deal of a lifetime. And behind the scenes, the locker room dynamic would be fascinating because veterans would be watching closely to see if Lawrence can command respect immediately, if he can lead men who have been in the league longer than him, and if he can handle the weight of a franchise that hasn't reached a Super Bowl in decades, but talks like it should be there every year. And as training camp unfolds in this scenario, every throw becomes a highlight, every mistake becomes a headline, and the hype machine goes into overdrive with fans buying jerseys, debate shows running nonstop segments, and former players chiming in with opinions ranging from this is a masterstroke to this will blow up in their faces. And the most fascinating part is that both sides might have valid points, because Trevor Lawrence's career so far has been a mix of promise, flashes of brilliance, inconsistency, and questions about whether he has truly lived up to the generational label. And Dallas represents both his biggest opportunity and his biggest risk, because if he succeeds there, his legacy skyrockets instantly, but if he struggles, the criticism will be louder than anything he's ever experienced. And then you zoom out and look at the league as a whole, and this hypothetical move would signal a shift in how teams value quarterbacks, showing that even highly drafted franchise guys aren't untouchable anymore, that teams are willing to make bold, disruptive changes if they believe it gets them closer to a championship. And that mindset could ripple across the NFL, encouraging more aggressive trades, more daring signings, and more chaos in future off seasons. And as the season begins in this imagined timeline, the Cowboys would instantly become must-watch TV, every primetime game loaded with narrative, every matchup framed as a test of whether this blockbuster move is paying off. And when Lawrence steps onto the field for his first game as a Cowboy, the atmosphere would feel electric, part excitement, part anxiety, part curiosity, because everyone watching knows they're witnessing the beginning of something that could redefine the next decade of the franchise. And whether it ends in championships or disappointment, one thing would be undeniable: the NFL would never feel boring with moves like this on the table. And fans would argue for years about the moment Trevor Lawrence put on a Cowboys jersey, debating where it ranks among the biggest quarterback shifts of all time, using it as a reference point whenever another superstar's future comes into question. And in the end, this alternate reality blockbuster isn't just about one player changing teams. It's about ambition, risk, legacy, and the relentless pursuit of greatness in a league where standing still is the fastest way to fall behind. And that's why a hypothetical move like Trevor Lawrence to the Dallas Cowboys feels so explosive, so fascinating, and so impossible to ignore. Because even when it's just a scenario, it captures everything fans love about the NFL. The drama, the debates, the dreams, and the belief that one decision can change everything.